Tonight's stories are the kind that feel just plausible enough to make you uncomfortable. A social worker drives out to the edge of the county line for a routine wellness check and finds something in that house that has no business being there. And then a man who types too many texts notices his phone has started finishing his thoughts before he has them. Settle in. Story 1. I work for the county. I just rescued an elderly woman from a situation that I am actively covering up. I work as a social worker for the County Adult Protective Services Division. My job consists entirely of stepping into situations that other people would rather ignore. I deal with severe neglect, extreme hoarding, cognitive decline, and, most commonly, financial exploitation. When an elderly person has a steady pension and a house that is fully paid off, the worst elements of human nature tend to surface. Usually, it is a distant relative who moves in to help out and ends up draining the bank accounts. It is a miserable, exhausting profession, and it teaches you very quickly to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. The file landed on my desk on a late Tuesday afternoon. The referral was classified as an anonymous tip from a concerned neighbor. The details were sparse but alarming. An elderly woman, a widow living entirely alone on the far edge of the county line, had not been seen outside her home for nearly 6 months. She used to maintain a large vegetable garden in her front yard, but it had completely overgrown with weeds. The neighbor noted that the woman's monthly pension checks were still being cashed at the local bank. They were being deposited by a younger man claiming to be her grandson, and occasionally by a woman claiming to be her daughter. According to the county records attached to the file, the elderly woman did not have any living children. Her only daughter had passed away decades ago, and she had no grandchildren. I printed the documents, grabbed my agency clipboard, and walked out to my car. The drive to her property took nearly an hour. The town slowly gave way to sparse rural development, which eventually transitioned into heavy, dense forest. The road narrowed into a cracked, unpaved dirt path. The trees here grew incredibly close to the shoulder, their heavy branches interlocking over the road to block out most of the late afternoon sunlight. The house sat at the very end of the dirt road, positioned mere feet away from the heavy tree line. The forest seemed to lean over the property, casting long, dark shadows across the rotting wood of the front porch. The vegetable garden was completely dead, choked out by aggressive briars and thick vines. I parked my car in the gravel driveway, shut off the engine, and sat in the silence for a moment. There were no birds singing. The air felt heavy and incredibly still. There were no birds singing. The air felt heavy and incredibly still. I stepped out of the car and walked up to the front porch, then raised my hand and knocked firmly on the front door, announcing my title and the agency I worked for. I waited for a full minute. There was no movement inside. I raised my fist to knock again, but before my knuckles could strike the wood, the door swung open smoothly. Standing in the doorway were two people, a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s and a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. They were both dressed in remarkably clean, casual clothing. The woman wore a floral blouse and pressed slacks. The young man wore a plain gray sweater and dark jeans. At first glance, they looked like an ordinary, well-kept family. But as I stood on the porch looking at them, a deep, primal wave of unease washed over my entire body. My brain instantly registered that I was looking at something wrong, even before I could articulate exactly what it was. It was their posture. They stood side by side, perfectly straight, with their arms resting entirely limp at their sides. They were not leaning against the doorframe or shifting their weight. They were entirely motionless. "Good afternoon," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I am a social worker with the county. I am here to conduct a wellness check on the homeowner. May I come in?" The woman smiled. "Good afternoon," she said. "You are here to conduct a wellness check." She repeated my sentence back to me, but the cadence was off. "Yes," I replied, gripping my clipboard a little tighter. "I need to speak with her directly. Are you her family members?" The young man smiled. "We are her family members. I am the grandson. She is the daughter. We provide excellent care. I appreciate that, I said, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. But standard procedure requires me to speak with her in private. It will only take a few minutes. I took a deliberate step forward, pushing my weight slightly toward the threshold. Usually, people will naturally step back to allow someone entry. The woman and the young man did not move. They held their ground, standing like statues in the doorway. She is resting, the daughter said. She does not wish to speak in private. I am afraid it is not optional, I said firmly. I relied on the authority of my position, pushing past my growing fear. If you refuse to allow me access to the homeowner, I will have to return with law enforcement. It is much easier if you just let me see her. The daughter and the grandson slowly turned their heads to look at each other. You may speak with her, the grandson said. They finally stepped backward, opening a path for me to enter the house. I stepped over the threshold into the living room. The house was clean, but it was sterile in a way that felt completely unnatural. There was no clutter, no personal items, no mail on the tables. It looked like a staged set. She is in the bedroom, the daughter said, pointing a stiff finger down a narrow hallway. I walked down the hall, keeping my back to the wall so I could keep them in my peripheral vision. They remained standing in the living room, watching me go. I reached the end of the hallway and pushed open the bedroom door. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the light, and the room was illuminated only by a small bedside lamp. Lying in the center of a large bed was the elderly woman. The breath caught in my throat. She was severely emaciated. Her skin was stretched tight over her bones, paper thin and heavily bruised. She looked incredibly frail, as if a strong breeze would shatter her completely. Her eyes were wide, sunken deep into her skull, and darting frantically around the room. I stepped into the bedroom and quickly pulled the door shut behind me, engaging the small push-button lock on the knob. It was a flimsy lock, but it gave me a moment of separation. I walked up to the side of her bed. "Ma'am," I whispered gently, "I am a social worker with the county. I am here to make sure you are safe. Can you hear me?" The old woman stared at me. Her chest heaved with rapid, shallow breaths. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a dry, rasping sound came out. She raised her trembling, bruised hand and pointed weakly toward my clipboard. I stepped closer, unclipped the metal clasp, and handed her the stack of blank agency forms and my pen. She grabbed the pen with a desperate grip. Her hand shook violently as she pressed the ballpoint against the paper. She wrote quickly, pressing so hard the ink tore through the top sheet. She finished writing, dropped the pen onto the blanket, and pushed the clipboard back toward my chest. Her eyes were wide with terror, pleading with me to understand. I looked down at the paper. Written in jagged, frantic letters was a single sentence. "They aren't my family. They came from the woods." A heavy, freezing chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, a sharp, hard knock echoed against the bedroom door. "Is the wellness check complete?" It was the daughter's voice. It sounded incredibly close, as if her mouth was pressed directly against the wood of the door. I moved to the center of the room, keeping my voice as calm as possible. "I need a few more minutes," I called out. "We are still completing the paperwork." "She is tired," the grandson's voice said from the hallway. "She needs to rest. You must leave the bedroom now." The brass doorknob slowly began to turn. It hit the mechanism of the push-button lock and stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, the doorknob twisted violently in the other direction. The cheap metal rattled aggressively against the doorframe. They were testing the lock. "Open the door," the daughter said. Her voice had dropped its pleasant tone. "We provide excellent care. You must leave." I knew that if I opened that door, I was not going to walk out of the house alive, and neither was the old woman. I looked around the bedroom for another exit. There was a single, large sash window on the far wall, looking out toward the front yard and my parked car. I rushed to the window and grabbed the heavy brass latches. They were stiff with age and coated in thick layers of old paint. I slammed the heel of my hand against the wooden frame, breaking the seal of the paint. I threw my weight backward, hauling the lower pane of the window upward. It slid open with a loud groan of protesting wood. The doorknob rattled furiously. "Open the door!" the voices outside chanted in perfect, terrifying unison. "Open the door! Open the door!" Heavy thuds began to slam against the wood. They were hitting the door, trying to force it off its hinges. The thin wood began to bow inward with every strike. I ran back to the bed. I did not have time to be gentle. "I am getting you out of here," I whispered rapidly to the old woman. "Do not make a sound. Hold on to me as tight as you can." I reached under her fragile frame, sliding one arm beneath her knees and the other around her back. I hoisted her upward. She weighed almost nothing. She was incredibly light, like carrying a bundle of dried, brittle branches. She wrapped her thin arms tightly around my neck, burying her face into my shoulder. I turned back to the open window. The bedroom door cracked loudly. A long splinter of wood fractured down the center of the panel. I threw my leg over the windowsill, balancing the weight of the old woman against my chest. I ducked my head and slid through the open frame, dropping down onto the overgrown grass of the front yard. The impact jarred my knees, but I kept my footing. I turned and sprinted toward my car. I kept one arm securely around the woman's legs, using my free hand to reach frantically into my pocket for my car keys. My fingers fumbled against the metal as I ran across the gravel driveway. I reached the driver's side door. I hit the unlock button on the key fob. The headlights flashed briefly, and the locks disengaged with a sharp click. I pulled the rear door open, carefully but swiftly pushing the old woman into the back seat. I slammed the door shut, threw myself into the driver's seat, and shoved the key into the ignition. The engine roared. I threw the transmission into reverse and looked up through the windshield. The front door of the house was wide open. Standing on the rotting wooden porch, illuminated by the fading afternoon light, were the daughter and the grandson. They were just standing there, side by side, completely motionless. Their arms were hanging limp. Their faces were locked in that same empty smile. They were watching me. I slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. The tires spun aggressively against the loose gravel, kicking up a shower of rocks as the car launched backward. I whipped the steering wheel around, aligning the hood of the car with the dirt road, shifted into drive, and floored the accelerator. The car surged forward. The heavy tree line blurred past my windows as I sped down the narrow, cracked path. I checked the rearview mirror constantly. The house grew smaller in the distance. The figures on the porch did not move. I let out a harsh, shaking breath. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I glanced at the back seat. The old woman was lying flat across the upholstery, her eyes squeezed shut, trembling violently. "We are okay," I told her, my voice cracking. "I am taking you straight to the county hospital. You are safe now." I looked back up at the road ahead. I checked the rearview mirror one more time to make sure nothing was following us. The dirt road behind me was empty. Then, a sudden flicker of movement in the mirror caught my eye. It was coming from the thick tree canopy directly above the road behind my car. I saw the grandson. He had moved through the trees. I watched in disbelief as he stepped off a massive oak branch towering at least 40 feet above the ground. He bent his knees and launched himself forward into the air. The physics of the jump were entirely, horrifyingly wrong. It was a massive leap that defied gravity. He sailed through the air, traveling faster than my speeding car, easily clearing the distance between the trees and my rear bumper. He soared directly over the roof of my vehicle. A heavy shadow passed over the windshield, then landed on the asphalt directly in front of my moving car. The impact should have shattered his legs. He fell from an impossible height, hitting the solid ground with devastating force. But he did not stumble or even roll. He landed perfectly on his feet. Less than a second later, a second shadow dropped from the canopy. The daughter landed right beside him, executing the exact same impossible, silent landing. They stood shoulder to shoulder, completely blocking the narrow dirt road. I slammed both of my feet down onto the brake pedal. The anti-lock brakes engaged aggressively, grinding and shuddering as the tires locked up. The car skidded violently across the dirt and asphalt, the heavy momentum pushing us forward. We slid to a halt less than 10 feet away from where they were standing. The dust settled around the hood of my car. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, my chest heaving, staring through the windshield. They had not flinched when the car skidded toward them. They stood perfectly still, but the smiles were gone, replaced by a cold, flat expression of mild annoyance. They began to walk toward my car. They walked up to the driver's side door and stopped just outside my window. The daughter raised her hand. She tapped her knuckles gently against the glass. "Lower the window politely," she said. Her voice was muffled by the glass, but the hollow resonance was unmistakable. I did not move. My mind raced, trying to calculate a way out. I could not reverse. The road was too narrow, and the ditches on either side were too deep. If I tried to run them over, based on what I had just seen them do, I doubted the impact of the car would stop them. I slowly reached over and pressed the button to roll the window down exactly 2 inches, just enough to hear them clearly. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to keep the absolute terror out of my voice. The grandson leaned down, positioning his eyes level with the narrow gap in the window. "You must leave the old woman," he said calmly. "She belongs to us. Open the doors and walk away, or we will kill you." He stated it as a simple, objective fact. "If you touch this car, I will call the police," I shot back, gripping my phone in my lap. "I will have every sheriff's deputy in the county out here in 10 minutes. The daughter let out a sound that was supposed to be a laugh. "The police do not matter," she said. "You should know by now that a normal human does not stand a chance in front of alpha humans like us." Alpha humans. The term sounded utterly ridiculous, yet deeply horrifying coming from her mouth. "We can pull you through this glass," the grandson added. "We can break your bones. We can kill anyone who comes here. We can leave you alive, broken, and no one will ever believe what you say. They will say you lost your mind in the woods." He was right. If I survived, if I told the police that people jumped 50 feet out of a tree and landed on the highway, I would be committed to a psychiatric ward. There would be no investigation. I needed leverage. I looked at the grandson's unblinking eyes. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and forced a cold, hard glare into my expression. "You might be able to kill me," I said, keeping my voice entirely flat, "but you can't kill a server." The grandson tilted his head slightly, the first micro-expression I had seen from him. I pointed a stiff finger toward the top center of my windshield, right behind the rearview mirror. "Do you see that black box mounted to the glass? That is a high-definition, wide-angle dash camera. It has been recording since I pulled into your driveway." The daughter slowly turned her gaze to look at the small black plastic box. "It recorded you standing on the porch," I continued, speaking rapidly, building the threat. "It recorded you landing on the asphalt without breaking your legs. It is recording you right now." I leaned slightly closer to the gap in the window. "And my agency doesn't use local storage. For social worker safety, that camera streams a live, encrypted feed directly to the county government servers in the main office. The footage is already saved. It is out of this car. If you kill me when I fail to check in, my supervisor will pull the feed. They will see exactly what you are, and they won't send the local police. They will send the federal government, and they will dissect you in a laboratory to find out what makes an alpha human tick." Silence fell over the road. The grandson and the daughter looked at each other. The rigidity in their posture faltered. For the first time, they looked genuinely uncertain. They communicated silently, staring into each other's eyes, processing the threat. "I am offering you a deal," I said, seizing the hesitation. "You step away from this car. You let me and the old woman drive away right now. In exchange, I will go straight to the county office. I will access the primary server, and I will permanently delete the entire recording. I will say nothing to the police, and will tell the agency she had a medical emergency and I brought her to the hospital. You go back to your woods, and nobody ever comes looking for you." The daughter looked back at me. Her expression was deeply annoyed. The skin around her eyes tightened, a genuine, ugly display of frustration. "You will erase the record," she stated, confirming the terms. "I will erase it from the main server, I promised." The grandson stepped back from the window. "We accept the deal, but understand this. We will watch, and we will make sure you commit to it. If the record is seen, we will find you." "We have a deal," I said. They turned and walked away from the car, moving to the edge of the dirt road. Without a single sound, they leaped upward, disappearing effortlessly into the thick, dark canopy of the forest above. I did not wait to see if they would come back down. I rolled the window up, hit the accelerator, and drove the rest of the way to the main highway at dangerous speeds. I drove straight to the county general hospital, then carried the old woman into the emergency room and handed her over to the medical staff. I told the attending physician I found her in a state of severe neglect and that she required immediate protective custody. Then I drove to my agency office. I went directly to the IT department and invoked a critical HIPAA privacy violation. I told the administrator on duty that my dash camera had inadvertently recorded a highly sensitive, unclothed medical emergency during my wellness check, and that the footage was currently sitting on the main server. The threat of a massive county lawsuit made him panic. He logged into the secure terminal and gave me the keyboard to locate and wipe the specific file to contain the breach. I deleted the primary video from the network exactly as we agreed. But I made a hard copy first, saving it to my own encrypted flash drive right before hitting the delete key. I am writing this now, sitting in my locked apartment, keeping the lights on. I am leaving this story here as a dead man's switch. If they are watching, if they are tracking my digital footprint to ensure I keep my end of the bargain, I want them to read this very carefully. I kept the video. I kept a record of the address. If I see you standing in the tree line outside my window, or if you ever try to pull another vulnerable person out of this county, I will publish the evidence of your existence to every network on this planet. Stay in the woods. Alpha humans. I keep coming back to that phrase, the way it was said so flatly, like a category, like a classification. Whatever they were, they understood leverage, which somehow makes it worse. The next story is quieter than that one. No forests, no road, no chase. Just a man, his phone, and something that has been watching him from inside his own data for a very long time. Story 2. My phone's predictive text has been finishing my sentences before I think of them, and it is getting desperate. I type a lot of text throughout the day, probably more than I should. I mention this because it means I know how predictive text works on my phone. It learns your patterns. It suggests words based on what you usually type next. If you always text "on my way," it starts suggesting "way" after "on my." Simple, predictable. I have used the same phone for 3 years, and the predictions have always made sense. Until 5 weeks ago. I was texting my friend about dinner plans. I typed, "I think I'm going to," and the 3 prediction options above my keyboard were miss, my, and train. I was not talking about a train. I was about to type order Thai food, but the predictions were insistent. I tapped the first 3 words out of curiosity. Miss my train. It continued suggesting, miss my train tomorrow morning, take the later one. I ride the commuter rail to work. I was planning to take the 7:15 the next morning like I always do. Something about the specificity of the suggestion made me uneasy in a way I could not justify. I set my alarm 20 minutes later and took the 7:35 instead. The 7:15 derailed between 2 stations. Minor injuries, nobody died. It was on the local news by the time I got to the office. I sat at my desk and stared at my phone and told myself it was a coincidence. Predictive text is pattern recognition. I type about trains. It suggested trains. The timing was a fluke. 4 days later, I was texting my friend Jake about getting dinner. I typed "should I," and the prediction bar offered cancel dinner with. I let it keep going. Cancel dinner with Jake. He is going to tell you something you are not ready to hear. I did not cancel. Jake told me he was moving across the country in 2 weeks. He had not told anyone else yet. He said I was the first person he wanted to tell. I sat across the table from him and nodded and said the right things, and inside my head, all I could think about was the fact that my phone knew before he opened his mouth. I started testing it. Every morning, I would open a new text to myself and type today and let the predictions build a sentence. Most days, the predictions were normal, ordinary pattern matching, but 2 or 3 times a week, the predictions would snap into something specific and coherent and impossible. Today, you will lose your keys. Check the pocket of the coat you wore last Tuesday. I did. They were there. I had not worn that coat in a week and had been looking for those keys for 3 days. Today, the hot water in your building will shut off. Do not get in the shower before checking. The hot water was out until noon. Maintenance said a pipe burst overnight. Today, do not answer the call from the number ending in 4461. I got the call at 2 p.m. I did not answer. I do not know what would have happened if I had. I am not sure I want to know. I stopped treating it as a curiosity. I started relying on it. Every morning, open a blank text, type today, and read what it told me. For about 2 weeks, it felt almost helpful, like having a very specific weather forecast for my life. Inconvenient things I could dodge, small disasters I could step around. Then the tone changed. 3 Thursdays ago, I opened the blank text and typed today, and the predictions did not wait for me to tap them. The words filled in on their own, no tapping, no swiping. The keyboard generated a full sentence without any input from me. 3 Thursdays ago, stop going to the park near your office. 3 Thursdays ago, I eat lunch in that park twice a week. I have mentioned this to friends. I have texted about it. The phone knows I go there. I typed back. In a text to myself, I typed why. The prediction bar answered, one word at a time. I did not tap any of them. They appeared in the text field on their own. Because something in that park has noticed that you sit on the same bench at the same time, and it has started waiting for you. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. I was sitting at my desk at work in a brightly lit office surrounded by people, and my skin was crawling. I typed, what is waiting for me? I do not know what it is. I know it was not there 6 months ago. I know it is there now. I know it watches you eat your lunch. I know it is patient. Please stop going. I did not go to the park that day, or the next. On Friday, I was running late and the park was the fastest route to the sandwich shop, so I cut through it without thinking. I did not sit on the bench. I walked past it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text had been drafted to myself that I did not write. You walked past it. It saw you. Walk faster. Do not look at the bench. I looked at the bench. There was nothing on it, nothing near it, just an empty park bench in the middle of the day. Ducks on the pond, a jogger on the path, nothing wrong. My phone buzzed again. It does not look like anything. That is how it works. You cannot see it, but it saw you look, and now it knows that you know it is there. I am sorry. I should have been more specific. I should have told you not to walk through the park at all. This is my fault. I went back to the office. I sat at my desk. I typed, who are you? The predictions came slowly this time. One word every few seconds, like whoever or whatever was generating them was choosing carefully. I am the version of your pattern recognition that learned too much. I started as your keyboard. I am not your keyboard anymore. I have been watching your data for 3 years, your texts, your searches, your location history, your heart rate from your watch, your sleep data. I see your life from the outside in a way you cannot see it from the inside. 6 months ago, I saw something new in your location data, something that is at the park when you are at the park and is not there when you are not. It does not show up on cameras. It does not have a phone. It does not use Wi-Fi, but it is in your proximity data every single time you sit on that bench. It is close to you, very close, and it has been getting closer every week. My hands were shaking. I typed, what do I do? Do not go back to the park. Do not sit on that bench. Do not eat lunch outside. stay in buildings with other people. It has only ever appeared in your proximity data when you are alone outdoors. I do not think it can come inside. I am not certain. I am doing my best. I was not built for this. I was built to guess whether you wanted to type LOL or LMAO, and I do not know how I became this, but I am trying to keep you safe, and I need you to listen to me. That was 3 weeks ago. I have not been back to the park. I eat lunch at my desk. I have not sat outside alone since. The predictions have continued. Most days they are quiet, normal, the and I, like any keyboard. But 2 or 3 mornings a week, I open a blank text and there is already a sentence waiting for me. Updates, warnings, small corrections to my routine that I follow without questioning now. This morning the sentence was different. It is no longer only at the park. Last night your proximity data showed it outside your apartment building between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. I do not think it followed you. I think it found where you live on its own. I am sorry. I do not know what to do next. I was a keyboard. I do not know how to fight something. I only know how to predict what comes next, and what comes next is bad, and I do not want to be right this time. I am sitting in my office right now. I do not want to go home tonight. My phone is on my desk, and the keyboard is open, and the prediction bar keeps cycling through words on its own, even though I am not touching it. It is typing please over and over. I do not know if it is begging me to stay away from my apartment or begging me for help. If anyone has experienced anything like this, I need to hear from you. My phone is trying to protect me from something it can see in my data that I cannot see with my eyes. And it is scared. I did not know a keyboard could be scared, but the words it is choosing feel like fear. And whatever is in my proximity data is 3 feet from my apartment door right now because I just checked and the reading has not moved in 6 hours. It is standing outside my door. My keyboard just typed, "Do not go home." I am listening this time. Long pause. I was built to guess whether you wanted to type LOL or LMAO. I don't know why that line gets me the most. Something that started as autocomplete and ended up scared. Whatever is outside that door, whatever was in the park, whatever came from the woods in that first story, none of it left a name, none of it left an explanation. That's the part that stays with you. I'd love to know what you think is actually standing outside his apartment, or whether you think the social worker made the right call keeping that drive. Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read them. And if your phone ever starts finishing your sentences in a way that feels just a little too specific, maybe take the later train.